The ethical boundaries of AI in storytelling. When I sat down to prepare for today's talk, I found myself at a profound ethical crossroads. I had intended to share with you a powerful story of transformation, of someone who overcame addiction, homelessness, and the threat of deportation. A story that would move you, inspire you, and perhaps even change how you see the world. But I couldn't. And today, that's precisely what I want to talk about. In our search for compelling narratives, we encountered a troubling reality. The person I had hoped to feature, this remarkable individual with the surname Rodriguez or Torres, wasn't fully verified in our research. We found fragments, mentions of a Julio Torres, a comedian and writer, references to scientific papers by Rodriguez Torres, brief notes about a Carmen Julia Rodriguez Torres in a Catholic publication, an Instagram post about someone named Patty Rodriguez. But none of these fragments formed a complete picture of the person I wanted to tell you about. None contained verified accounts of overcoming addiction, homelessness, or immigration challenges. And this brings us to the heart of today's conversation: the ethics of storytelling in an age where the line between fact and fiction increasingly blurs. How often do we hear remarkable stories that move us to tears, inspire us to action, or change our perspective on complex issues? Stories of triumph over adversity, of human resilience in the face of overwhelming challenges. These narratives shape our understanding of the world, influence our decisions, and connect us to experiences beyond our own. But what happens when these stories aren't true, or when they're embellished for emotional impact? What responsibility do we bear as storytellers, as content creators, as human beings sharing information with one another? In today's digital landscape, where AI can generate convincing narratives indistinguishable from human writing, where social media rewards emotional engagement over factual accuracy, where clicks and shares drive revenue, the temptation to create or embellish stories is stronger than ever. I could have fabricated a compelling narrative about Rodriguez Torres. I could have woven together fragments of different stories, added emotional touch points, created a journey of redemption that would have moved you deeply. The technology exists to make such fabrications convincing. The algorithms reward such content. The audience, you, might never have known the difference. But something profound would have been lost: trust, integrity, the fundamental covenant between speaker and listener, that what I'm sharing with you is, to the best of my knowledge, true. Think about the stories that have shaped your worldview, the narratives about immigrants that influence your political positions, the tales of addiction and recovery that shape your understanding of substance abuse, the accounts of homelessness that inform your views on urban policy. How many of these stories have you verified? How many came from trusted sources? How many might have been crafted primarily to elicit an emotional response rather than to convey truth? This isn't just about honesty for honesty's sake. When we fabricate or exaggerate stories about marginalized communities, immigrants, people struggling with addiction, individuals experiencing homelessness, we risk perpetuating harmful stereotypes. We risk simplifying complex systemic issues into individual narratives of triumph or failure. We risk creating policy based on fiction rather than fact. Consider the impact of a fabricated success story. Former addict overcomes homelessness through sheer determination. Such a narrative might inspire, but it could also reinforce the damaging myth that systemic problems like addiction and homelessness are primarily issues of individual willpower rather than complex social, economic, and healthcare challenges requiring collective solutions. The ethical implications extend even further in our AI powered era. As we speak, artificial intelligence systems are being trained on vast data sets of human writing, learning to mimic our storytelling patterns, our emotional cues, our narrative structures. These systems can now generate compelling human like content at scale, content that feels authentic but may be entirely fabricated. I was faced with this exact dilemma in preparing for today. The temptation was there. Use AI to fill in the gaps, to create the perfect story that would illustrate my points, move my audience, make my talk memorable. The technology exists. The barriers are falling. The line between enhancement and fabrication grows thinner every day. But what happens to our information ecosystem when we can no longer distinguish between authentic human experiences and generated content? What happens to our understanding of social issues when the most compelling narratives about them might be partially or entirely fictional? What happens to our empathy when the stories that move us most deeply turn out to be sophisticated fabrications? This isn't just a theoretical concern. We're already seeing the consequences of information manipulation across our society, in politics, in healthcare decisions, in community responses to crises. The damage to trust is real and growing. I believe we stand at a critical juncture. As storytellers, as information consumers, as citizens of an increasingly complex information landscape, we need to establish and defend new ethical boundaries. For those of us who create content, whether we're journalists, podcasters, speakers, or social media influencers, this means committing to rigorous verification. It means being transparent about our sources and our limitations. It means being willing to say, I don't know enough to tell this story, rather than filling in gaps with convenient fabrications. It means acknowledging that sometimes the most honest story is about what we don't know. Like my admission to you today that I couldn't verify the details about Rodriguez Torres that would have made for a compelling narrative. For those of us who consume content, which is all of us, this means developing a more sophisticated information literacy. It means asking questions about sources. It means being willing to sit with complexity rather than embracing oversimplified narratives. It means recognizing that the stories that move us most emotionally should sometimes be the ones we scrutinize most carefully. It means understanding that the most authentic human connections aren't built on perfect narratives, but on shared commitments to truth, even when that truth is messy, incomplete, or still emerging. Some might argue that I'm making too much of this, that stories have always contained elements of embellishment, that audiences understand this implicit contract, that emotional resonance matters more than strict factual accuracy. But I believe something profound is at stake: our collective ability to address real human suffering through shared understanding of real human experiences. When we fabricate stories about addiction, we dishonor those truly struggling with substance use disorders. When we invent narratives about immigration, we disrespect the actual lived experiences of migrants. When we create fictional accounts of homelessness, we distract from the real systemic failures that leave people without shelter. The most powerful stories, the ones that truly change hearts, minds, and policies, don't need fabrication. Reality, in all its complexity, contains more than enough drama, tragedy, resilience, and triumph to move us to action. So today, instead of sharing a manufactured story about Rodriguez Torres, I'm sharing something more honest, a commitment to ethical storytelling in an age of blurring boundaries, a pledge to prioritize verification over emotional impact, a call for all of us to become more thoughtful creators and consumers of narrative. This isn't just about journalistic integrity or academic rigor. It's about preserving our capacity for genuine human connection in an increasingly mediated world. It's about ensuring that our empathy is directed toward real suffering, that our actions address real needs, that our policies solve real problems. The stories we tell matter. They shape how we see each other, how we understand complex issues, how we allocate resources, how we design solutions. We owe it to each other, particularly to those whose stories involve vulnerability and marginalization, to tell these stories with care, precision, and respect for truth. As we leave this space today, I challenge each of you to examine your relationship with the stories you consume and the stories you share. Ask yourself, am I prioritizing emotional impact over accuracy? Am I verifying information before passing it along? Am I contributing to a culture of fabrication or a culture of truth seeking? Because in the end, the most powerful connection we can create isn't through perfect narratives that move us to tears. It's through honest communication that moves us towards shared understanding and effective action. The world doesn't need more perfect stories. It needs more truthful ones. It needs your commitment to ethical storytelling, to careful listening, to verification before sharing. It needs your willingness to sit with complexity rather than embracing oversimplification. Our future depends not just on the stories we tell, but on how we tell them. Let's choose truth, even when it's messy. Let's choose verification even when it's inconvenient. Let's choose ethical boundaries, even as technology makes it easier to cross them. Because that's how we build not just compelling content, but a more compassionate and effective society, one true story at a time. Thank you.